Hello, welcome to Cinema Savvy, and welcome back to a brand new movie review. In anticipation for Spider-Man Homecoming, we're continuing our reviews of the good Spider-Man films, the Sam Raimi Trilogy. Last review was Spider-Man, the original. We are moving on to Spider-Man 2 from 2004, as I said, once again directed by Sam Raimi. I'm Chris Garner, joined with George Aldridge. Our last review was probably one of my favourite ones that we've ever done on the channel. It was great going back to these movies, and that's absolutely the case with this one too. My personal review on this, before we go into it, this is my favourite one of the trilogy. I think a lot of people would say that who are fans of these films. More so than anything, to me, this is where they completely nailed it. And not only is it the best Spider-Man movie, it's one of the best superhero films ever made, even still to this day by 2017 standards.
Yeah, it's a weird one. Going back to it, it's definitely the best film, but this is something where I can literally hand in hand on a good day I prefer Spider-Man 2 to Spider-Man 1. On a good day I prefer Spider-Man 1 to Spider-Man 2. That's just naturally how the series has been with me, and I guess it says a lot about those two films that they're both outstanding. And you know exactly what you said as well. It is one of the best comic book films today, and on the unseen battle of the brackets, it did win the best comic book film ever made, and it's probably got a good chance of winning it if we ever did it again. It's exactly what a sequel should do. Not bigger and better, develop the character story arcs, and this is precisely what this film did, while adding in all of the things that made Spider-Man 1 so amazing. Yeah,
and we were actually looking at the behind the scenes of it, sort of how they were creating the original story idea for this, and they had three villains in mind, didn't they? They had there was Dr. Octopus, there was Black Cat, and oh god, who was the third one now? Lizard. They had three villains confirmed, eventually whittled it down to one, but this is where I think, especially with sequels, just give us one solid villain. Brilliantly developed villain, brilliantly developed hero, just solid movie through and through. And I was checking out Rotten Tomatoes as well, still at 94%, absolutely still well deserved. And in tone, it develops the character a lot more. It kind of goes into the character of Peter Parker a lot more, but tonally, it's still exactly the same as the first one. It has the right amount of campiness in it, comedy, a lot of cheesy scenes in this one, especially like the first one had, but still, it feels in keeping with this world, this take on the Spider-Man universe that Sam Raimi created.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I was going to say, if you watch them back-to-back, you wouldn't notice a difference, and then I realised that on Friday I did watch Spider-Man 1 and 2 back-to-back, and they follow on from each other so well, and even the third one does to a slight degree, but we'll get to that on the next review. But to bash the Amazing Spider-Man double, which I keep doing, just not even like nasty doing it, the tone of them. If you look at the first film that came out in 2012, what was popular at the time, The Dark Knight, and so the Amazing Spider-Man, the tone, this was dark as in not just colour palette, but the story arc, the truth about his parents, all this nonsense. There was Spider-Man 1, and if you do that for the first one, you got to do it for all of them. Cut to Spider-Man 2, the Amazing Spider-Man 2, don't want to get the good ones mixed up, and it's 2 years after the Avengers has come out. The Avengers outgrossed, was the big hit, so Sony thought, what would be great? Let's shape a universe. Let's have a bright colour palette, unlike the first one. Let's make him witty. Let's change this, that, the other. And you couldn't watch them back to back, not just because they were crap, but because they don't work with each other. They don't feel. It feels like different films, not a sequel. Whereas going back to these ones, I know it's the same director, but so are the Amazing Spider-Man ones. These feel like they continue on, and you wouldn't expect. They say there's a 2-year gap between 1 and 2, and you've got to think, okay, because 2002 is 2004, but it feels in the modern day of Avengers, where there's something new every 2 weeks. It's so nice again to go back to the whole single superhero, but 2 years down the line, not much has changed in a very good point, which kicks in the character journey.
Yeah, and I guess we'll talk a bit about how we first saw this film. Now, I mentioned on the last review that Spider-Man 3, unfortunately, was the only one of these films that I actually went to the cinema to see. This one, pirate copies when they were a thing. I think I was in my last year at school, and a friend said, I've got a copy of Spider-Man 2, do you want to see it? And I think that, I don't know if I was planning to go to the cinema later that weekend, but I said oh yeah, I'll watch it. But I just watched it on a crappy pirate copy, which is never the way to do it. And then I never went to the cinema to see it. I was absolutely gutted, and it is the best Spider-Man movie. And out of any of them, if I'd wish I could have got to the cinema to see any of these films, it would have been the second one. If anything, just for that train sequence, which we'll talk about later when we get to action. So yeah, it was kind of just really awkward with this film that I just sort of watched it on a whim, on a copy. And then I eventually bought it on DVD, and that's really my great Spider-Man 2 viewing experience. There's not really much else to say other than that, really.
Mine... So I saw it twice at the cinema, and I couldn't tell you the dates of both of them. I remember one of them was with my family, just like Spider-Man 1, and it was probably the opening weekend, the opening week. And then I went again the day after my 8th birthday, because it came out in July, and I met my auntie and my uncle at the time, and that was amazing going to see it. I don't think... had I ever seen a film... I was seeing Star Wars 1 twice at the cinema, but I don't know if I'd ever seen a film twice before. Mm-hmm. And it was amazing seeing the film again, but one of my vivid memories of this Spider-Man 2 was the uncle I watched cinema. He come up to me and goes, I saw this, I thought you'd like it, blah blah blah. And it was my first ever copy of Empire magazine, and I think it was voted their best ever cover, the Spider-Man 2, when it was 3D lenticular, and it was Spider-Man's web in the face of the camera. And it depressed me to this day that I must have binned it between 2004 and the time... It wasn't immediately, because I remember finding it a couple of years later, but I think when I had my room redone, probably 4 or 5 years later, I obviously got rid of it, and that was before I was a subscriber to Empire, so in some nasty twist of fate, it turned out I binned probably the best one there was. But I've got very fond memories of this. Like with the original trilogy, I saw them all at the cinema, and I got the DVD. The DVD got upgraded to Blu-ray when the time was right. And, hopefully over the coming months we'll get a 4K release, and then I will be upgrading to that when I can.
Yeah, and we should say as well that this review, well, for me anyway, I don't know if you've seen it, will be on the original theatrical version of Spider-Man 2. I know there's a 2.1 version out there. I still actually haven't seen that. I've seen a couple of scenes from it, but I've never seen it all in context, beginning to end. Before we jump into the characters and give our rundown and our critique on all the characters' journeys in this film, I think another reason why this is my favourite is just sort of the experience surrounding this movie. Now, while I didn't go to the cinema to see it, a big propelling force of my enjoyment for this film was going back to the video games like we talked last time. Spider-Man 2, the video game on PlayStation 2 for me, is without a question of a doubt one of my favourite games that I've ever played in my life, and it's probably, if it's not number one, it's in the top 3 of best movie tie-in games. It's very difficult to get a good movie tie-in game nowadays, and kind of even back then. I think they're actually not as well known now, but definitely throughout the 2000s they were kind of the in thing. When a film came out, you'd pick up the game alongside it. It introduced the free roam. It really made you feel like you were the Spider-Man character. It brought in all that action. And I think I poured so many hours into that game, and I still go back to it every now and then. Don't play it as much as I did, but I jump on for like half hour, just swing around the city and have fun with it. And we're actually getting a new Spider-Man video game that looks like, for PS4, but it looks like that modern equivalent of the experiences that we had from that Spider-Man 2 game.
Yeah, the new Spider-Man game is absolutely phenomenal. I won't go into that, but check out the E3 gameplay. It's like a cross between the old Spider-Man games and the Arkham games for those that are intrigued. Mm-hmm. I think I said in the first review that I've got memories of the Spider-Man 1 PC game. I'd never had Spider-Man 2, but it's the one that everyone says you've got to play. And maybe one day if I binge some old games, I'll pick one up from a shop or something, because they're probably easy to find. But the Spider-Man games were always great. I think they used to be able to get the voice actors across as well, if I can remember correctly. Back in the day, video games for films were common. They'd always have like a 30-second clip of the film, then you'd go into a level or something like that. I never knew if Spider-Man did, but I remember Star Wars 3 did. But a memory I have with this was something that, not like an arrogant, there's always something I wanted but I would never get. It's the same with every kid. Mm-hmm. All the Spider-Man, at this point I was mental with Lego as a kid. All my room was like Lego Star Wars, and there was Spider-Man 2 Legos. And if I remember correctly, there was 3. There was the train, there was the kind of warehouse on the side that obviously Doc Ock's at, and I think it was either the bank.
Yeah, I was going to say, the bank seems like a probable one.
And I remember, like, I always wanted, like, one. And I never got them. You know, I wasn't, at the end of the day, I used to pick up Star Wars stuff, so I wasn't too fussed, but I always wanted that Spider-Man one. And then out of curiosity, I had a look on eBay last week, and I think the trade one's about 200 quid if you want it an open now. Whereas back then it was probably like 30, 40 quid if that. And I couldn't even find a listing for the warehouse, which would have obviously been the one that cost the bomb. But very fond memories of this franchise. But getting that Lego deal, probably one of the first Marvel properties to get a Lego deal, and quite maybe one of the biggest to ever get one after Star Wars at that time.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't want to go too much into the merchandise, but Sony own the rights to the film, but I think Marvel still own all the rights to the merchandise and the character, don't they? So I'm sure they're going to put some new stuff out with this movie anyway, but let's get into the characters now for Spider-Man 2. So, pretty much, we'll go through the main core cast and some of the side characters as well. We've definitely got a lot of awesome side characters in this one especially. But we'll kick off with Peter Parker Spider-Man, played once again by Tobey Maguire. We gave our thoughts on him last time. He's both of our favourite incarnations of Peter Parker and the Spider-Man character, and especially so in this one. Not only do they ramp up the action with him, but I love it. It's the logical progression of where to take the character with this one. It's the classic sequel to a superhero film where they're questioning their place, their identity, if what they're doing is right, and their struggle between their superhero alter ego and their everyday life. It's a tried and tested sequel mechanic when it comes to superhero films, and I talked about last time, even Sam Raimi said this, that the structure of the 3 Spider-Man films follows very closely the structure of the first 3 Superman films. And in terms of being faithful to the comic book, the issue, the famous comic was it Spider-Man No More with the whole suit and the trash can. I think that was in the trailer. I distinctly remember thinking about that shot when I saw the trailer, and even to this day, it's always the image that I tie together with this film. It's perfect, and he plays it really well. We get that scene with Uncle Ben in the car. It goes back to that, just hammering home that with great power comes great responsibility. Ties greatly with this film. And I think that you just get swept up into his personal life. You want to see him have that normal life, and it's the tragedy of the character. It's like most superheroes, but it's that tragedy of the character, how ultimately, at the end of the film, they find their destiny. They know they have to be that superhero, regardless of the sacrifices they have to make in their own lives.
Yeah, and I think with the superhero sequels, it's always about developing characters, but this was not only one of the first ones to do that, but to A, do it well, but B, a sequel as a whole.
Yeah.
And not necessarily they've done they're very different films, but this is up there to me as one of the best sequels of all time, because it does precisely what it has to do. Not bigger and better, continue the story and develop it further. And with Spider-Man, you've probably got one of the cheesiest lines ever made of great power comes great responsibility. But it's not that the film's focused around it, but the responsibility of Spider-Man is outweighing the character of Peter Parker. And that's such an important key topic, because if you look in the Iron Man films, Tony Stark's Iron Man, done and dusted. Captain America, no one cares about. I forgot his name.
Steve Rogers, isn't it?
Precisely, yeah. Steve Rogers or Steve. I don't know. There's a Steve in every World War film these days.
Yeah.
With aeroplanes. Spoiler alert. And with this, it's just I remember as a kid the whole trash ban, the trash can, exactly what you said. Spider-Man No More. He stops being him. And the journey, you just get a couple of scenes in the films where it really goes to show the impact that Spider-Man's made. Not the newspaper montages, but seeing the guy in the street get beat up and him not being able to do anything, and he clearly wants to, but he won't and he can't. And you're kind of there okay, the world needs Spider-Man, but Peter Parker needs to be Peter Parker. He's also his friendship with Mary Jane through that. He's obviously struggling at university or whatever it is over there. And I love what they did with him. It was such a simple idea, but I think the way the tone of the film goes about it works even more in its favour.
Yeah, and one thing I wanted to talk about in the last review, completely forgot, and I told you as soon as we finished recording, I wanted to talk about it, but I guess this is a good time to talk about it too, because it filters into the plot. But the whole organic web shooter thing, I think that's a fantastic idea. It just makes sense that when he's bitten by a spider, he gets all the powers of a spider and not just a few. I've never liked the web shooters. I've never liked that at all. Do you think the whole thing of him losing his powers psychologically works for this film? To me, it's kind of like the Professor X thing in Days of Future Past, where he can suddenly walk again, and it's if he's feeling bad about himself, or if he doesn't take the serum, then he goes back to losing the feeling in his spine. Do you think it's kind of a cop-out for the character that Spider-Man just all of a sudden stops being able to use his powers just because he's feeling a bit sorry for himself, or do you think it works for the film?
I think it works because you're seeing how him using his powers is affecting his life, and that he is struggling at school. He's losing friendships. He can't do the things he wants to be able to do. And I think it works the context that he's losing his powers. To me, to this day, he always lost his powers because he just couldn't handle it. And I think the way they do it works. And with the web shooter stuff, how stupid would it be if he lost his powers of climbing up a wall in a spider sense? Because web shooters, he makes himself. He didn't get bitten by a spider to get the technology to do that. He made it himself, which I've never, ever, ever liked. So the whole organic web shoot's come into this film better than, and quietens the fans hyped up about that. But I think it does work, especially when you get the whole ending where he gets his powers back to save MJ, because at the end of the day, she is the fuel of his fire, if you know what I mean. And I think it's done sublimely. That they could have messed it up. They could have said, "Oh yeah, it's just you feeling sorry for yourself." But I think the way Sam Raimi's done the film, and how he's not foreshadowed the events of it, but how he's set up this scene in the first third, and then you get the second third of the film, you're seeing how completely different it is. Example, play. He can't make it to the first play, but then in the second act, he can make it to the second play. And it's about finding the balance between being Peter Parker and Spider-Man. I think it does that perfectly.
Yeah, no, completely agree. And I know that on the plan we've got Alfred Molina next, Dr. Octopus, but I think this is probably a good jumping point to go to Mary Jane, actually, because the two characters are very much tied together in this film, and the course that their romance goes throughout this one. I still like Kirsten Dunst in this role. I still think she's really good in this film, but after watching it again, I think she's more so in the third one. She comes across as a little pious and a little above her station in this one, in a few scenes, mostly surrounding the whole marriage thing to Jonah Jameson's character. But in terms of her actual state, like, you kind of agree with her. She says that, she gives a line in the film where she says that, you know, Aunt May's seen my play so many times. My dad even came to see it. He went behind stage to borrow cash. You understand her mentality in this film, how her best friend and the person she does want to be with, because you still do get that sense that she does want to be with Peter Parker. She's just kind of waiting for him to have the confidence to outright say it. But there are some moments, the one I quoted where he says, like, do you want to go get some chow mein? She just kind of snaps at him like, Peter, I'm getting married. It's like, well, yeah, okay, what relevance does that have in terms of getting food? You know what I mean? So there's little moments like that where I don't like a character, but in terms of the progression of the relationship, and especially when we get to the end of the film as well, where she finally discovers the identity. I think she's already kind of known, but she clocks on fully at the end that he is Spider-Man, and the last shot of the film, she gets the final shot of the movie. I always thought it was the swing away into the city again, like the first movie, but it's a really kind of foreboding shot of her at the end where you can see the uncertainty, where she's happy that she's with Peter, but she's unsure of this lifestyle that he's going to lead and what that's going to mean between them going into Spider-Man 3.
Yeah, and I like Mary Jane. It is the third one where it starts to go a bit tits up, but I like the whole marriage angle in this. It is very sudden, and I will say the 2.1 edition does make an example of scene about that. But going back to the original copy, it does the right things. You don't want to find out at the start of the film he's Spider-Man, and you've got to build up that whole, why doesn't he like me? You've got to keep building that, have them fall out, have them not get invited to the wedding, and then it does become a worth at the end, because when she finds out he is Spider-Man, it's such a well done scene, and especially when the building almost collapses on him at the same time. Mm-hmm. I always thought not funny, but it was that right kind of balance, and I thought it was just wonderfully put together, their romance for this film, and ultimately they do find their way together, which you'd expect them to get together by the end of the sequel, and I think the way this film did it, rather than chuck them together, I mean, it's like Iron Man 2, they just randomly kiss in, and it doesn't feel like the film's built towards it, mm-hmm. Whereas you've got this, where you've had two films that have built up to that moment.
Yeah, I mean, she does ultimately become the damsel in distress again, which is kind of a trope of all three of these movies, but again, I don't really have a problem with it in this one, because it does tie into the plot of him, he gives up his powers so that he can be with MJ. Circumstances happen where she's getting married, even though he is back to the original Peter Parker now, eventually becomes Spider-Man again. So her being present in that end scene kind of rounds everything off in terms of their story arc in this film for their relationship, so I don't have a problem with it in this one. That's a different story for when we get to Spider-Man 3 though. But let's get on to our big villain from this one. So how do you top Willem Dafoe from the first one? Some people might argue that you can't top him, but by God, do we get an awesome villain in this second one. So we have Otto Octavius, Dr. Octopus, played by the great Alfred Molina, and like Willem Dafoe, and like many of the characters in this we talked about last time, they're completely off the page. I can't imagine anyone else playing this role. Alfred Molina is perfect casting. And it's not a new thing in superhero films, but I thought it was a really interesting angle that they took with the character in making him that sympathetic villain, because he is, and they do a great job. There's only a couple of scenes with him, with his wife Rosie at the beginning, but it's that naturalistic dialogue. They have a great chemistry together, and it seems like they're a really happy couple, happy family, until everything goes wrong. It's always a scientific experiment that goes wrong with these films. But and I like the angle that they did with not only Dr. Otto Octavius, but himself with the arms, how they have that inhibitor chip and how it fuses to his spine, and these arms are talking to him. It's kind of like a split personality thing going with him. I don't know if that's in the comic books. I think it's literally just a mad scientist with mechanical arms in the comic book. I don't know if they've ever gone this route, how it's actually fused to his spine and they're controlling him. I thought it was just... It's a perfect realisation of the character in every single way.
Yeah, I guess it is a trope of the trilogy, the damsel in distress, the scientific experiment gone wrong. However, in this, they build up to it, and he's only, say, got 2 scenes until it's already happened, but we meet his wife, they make the point, especially if you tie this into the love angle where, Peter Parker tells them about he's totally in love with someone, then they go over there, how they got together at uni. I think she was studying English, and he was studying...
science or something.
There we go.
Yeah.
And you've got his backstory there, and then Peter Parker says, "What if you get something wrong?" He goes, "Well, this is my life's work." And from that moment on, we know it's going to go wrong, but we've got everything set up for what happens, and then we do get Rosie's death, which is, I remember as a child, not as a child, as a kid, it's when the glass would smash. All I'd ever think of is just Spider-Man 2. To this day, I still don't know how she died. I still think she should have just turned around. She seemed like she had a lot of time to think about it.
Just run out of the room, just anything.
Yeah, but it was, Spider-Man 1 is too much board related that, okay, I'm doing this experiment and I'm going to get us to Glider, don't worry, this is how it's going to work. Whereas this, it's, I have to do this, and then what comes after, at the end of the day, of the Green Goblin, not as a criticism, but he doesn't. I mean, he kills the Oscorp board, and then it's just about killing Spider-Man, I guess. I think you made the point of that. What's the goal? Whereas with this, it's about getting the experiment in her honour, and that makes him the villain, robbing the bank to steal the money to get the equipment, to only having to fight Spider-Man because Harry makes him for the Tridium. I think the character works better to the story than Green Goblin. I can't compare the performances and characters because to me, they're the top 2 Spider-Man villains. Not just because they've been in the first 2 films, but I guess you could add Venom in there, and you've probably got Batman's most famous 3, which do actually come in the trilogy. But there's a reason why they're in the trilogy.
Yeah.
But it's a villain that could have gone wrong, but they nailed everything from performance to the design of the tentacles, to the aesthetics, to the story. I absolutely love Otto Octavius and Alfred Molina. The thing I love most about him is that he's a very, not classical stage actor, that's the wrong word, but you don't see him pop up in blockbuster films. There's a reason why he took this project on.
And we actually watched the behind-the-scenes footage of him before. It looked like he was having a lot of fun on set. And it must have been pretty arduous, with the... I think he was in some kind of harness and winch and everything like that. So it must have been tough to act with, but it looked like he did it with good spirits, and the performance you get on camera is fantastic. When you said you can't compare them to Willem Dafoe, the only thing that I can think of in terms of the characterizations in this is that with Norman Osborn and Peter Parker in the first one, you kind of had that father-son angle with it, which obviously annoyed Harry Osborn quite a lot. In this one, it's more teacher and student.
Yeah.
Because as soon as the two meet each other, Harry's arranged this meeting so that the two can get together. Peter Parker's wrote a paper on Octavius's work, and there's a nice bit of connective tissue as well between the first one, how we learnt that Spider-Man worked with Kurt Connors at some point, which we'll talk about him later, and then Otto Octavius says oh yeah, Connors has mentioned you, so it's connecting those two characters together. Sadly, we didn't get the Lizard in this universe, in this incarnation of Spider-Man. But right from the off, you get that respect that Peter Parker has for him, and Otto Octavius is the teacher. He says that intelligence isn't a privilege, it's a gift, and it should be used for the good of mankind, which is then bookended at the end where Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker, delivers the same lesson back to Otto Octavius, which is what snaps him out of it. I love that angle, and I think that completely works for the character. And as I said, I like that darker side with the arms talking to him. And I guess we can talk about we might be able to talk about it in CGI and effects, but I think we should talk about it with Melina. But how they actually did the arms is incredible. Like, so much of it was done with practical effects. I think the only shots where it was with CGI is really from either when he's a completely fully rendered CGI shot, or when he's like picking himself up like his own body weight. In the background, they were all very practical. But I mean, that's just testament to Sam Raimi as a director, and just the level of, because I mean, I think each arm had 4 puppeteers. They all rehearsed the scene with Alfred Molina beforehand, so it must have been a hell of a lot of preparation work to get it all, you know, come across as well as it does on camera. But it looks great, it looks fantastic. And that one scene as well, we were talking about this before we hit record, but where he's on the hospital bed and they're ready to cut the arms off. It's one of like the most terrifying scenes you'll ever see in a superhero film. It's just that Sam Raimi going right back to his classic horror roots with that.
Yeah, and you know, once you see that scene, okay, this guy's done horror. He knows how to do horror, because it is terrifying, especially the nails screeching on the floor.
You got the chainsaw again, trying to cut off an arm like Evil Dead.
Yeah, and it's terrifying. As a kid, it's terrifying. And even rewatching it again, it's still. I think it's just me. I'm someone that doesn't like the whole nail screeching sound. Fine with Trotter Boards, but the nail screeching on the floor just brings back memories of this film. That's the right thing to do. And what I love, even with that scene, is when he breaks out, you can just see like how confused and dazed he is about the whole situation. But going back to the tentacles, one of my favourite. It's not really a scene, but one of my favourite bits of the film is just when the tentacle like gets the cigar out and lights it for him and stuff. And I always loved that when I was younger. I thought it was just absolutely amazing. It's kind of like the whole lazy hat where you put a beer in your hat and you drink to the straw to the face, but this is your own tentacles doing it for you. They're absolutely incredible in this, and there's a reason why this won the best visual effects of the Oscars. You cannot ever tell when it. There's a couple of shots, but it isn't clear when it's CG and when it's practical, and that's the testament of the visual effects crew and Sam Raimi.
And going back to like the tone of these films, so you do have like that really horrific scene with that, but they still balance it with the classic comic book roots. Like, Sam Raimi never forgets that this is a comic book movie, and he has fun with it. And a lot of the dialogue from Dr. Octopus in this film is very cheesy. I mean, he has a kind of Vader-esque no when he's killed all the surgeons in the room, which is hilarious. And then a lot of his dialogue is like this grandiose take over the world speech, like, we're going to build this engine, make it stronger than ever, no one will stand in our way. But it feels part of the tone, it feels part of the movie, and it is a comic book, and he delivers it well. And you kind of connect with the character because he's lost his wife, he's pretty much lost everything. The only thing he literally has to live for now is his life's work. If that's gone, then he has nothing. So it's a logical progression of where the character goes, even if he does want to build like a giant end of the world doomsday machine. But again, it's a classic comic book story, so I don't have a problem with it. We need to talk Harry Osborne in this one, and I know you want to. There's one scene in particular with Harry Osborne that we should talk about the most, but I think this is probably his best film. I know he has a lot to do in the third one. The third one has a lot of problems, which we'll get to next time. But from where we left off with him in the first movie into the second one, we see how obsessive he's getting. He's got newspaper clippings. He's got everything scattered all over the desk. He is very much losing his mind before he even discovers that hidden room with the goblin mask and the glider and everything like that. And they don't beat around the bush. They get straight to it. At the end of this movie, he finds out that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. They get right to it with this film. I love the course that his character takes in this one, which is, I know I'm repeating myself because it's just how good this movie is. But and I think it's probably his best performance in this one as well. Although he does have great moments in 3, but I think James Franco in this one really knocks it out of the park with Harry Osborne. Yeah,
it's what do you do? Okay, so we've seen him find out he's killed his dad at the end of 1. What next in 2? And obviously the goal was eventually do Goblin Jr. in the third one. And this, I love it. It's from his opening scene. He's like, still taking pictures of the bug. And there's that awkward, not silence, but it's the know-how from the audience to the on-screen events that we know he's Spider-Man, Harry doesn't. And it's just such an awkward situation for his best mate and all that, but I love it as the film develops that, Harry is tied into the whole not Peter Osborne, the whole lot of Octavius thing, that he's supplying the tritium, and that brings him into, because I guess he is a secondary villain as such. I mean, he says to Doc Ock, if you bring me Spider-Man, I'll give you all the tritium in the world you need. He had no intention of going out and finding Spider-Man until it got to that point, which I love because it's with these films, I say a lot in these reviews that, not these Spider-Man, but reviews as a whole, it's what happens in the film. It's necessity of characters needing to do things rather than having them do it for the sake of it.
Mm-hmm.
And we know, like, I guess the Goblin is an example that he's just trying to kill Spider-Man because he's trying to kill Spider-Man. It's not easy in his way. Whereas this, to get my tritium, I have to kill Spider-Man. We'll bring him to Harry. But what I remember most when I was younger, actually, now I'm thinking about it, all of the trailers before this came out, it all finished with Harry, let's find out who's below the mask, and it was the famous knife shot. I remember that all of the trailers. And I remember when the first time I saw this film, I was stunned that they revealed it to Harry who it was. And it was a great performance. The reaction of finding out it was his best friend, everything that followed it, leading up to that wonderful hyped scene. I thought Harry had one of the best character acts. I mean, there's a load of amazing character acts in these films, but Harry in this one is maybe one of the best.
Yeah, and we get to resurrect Willem Dafoe as well for a cameo appearance in this one. I think he features in the third one as well, doesn't he? I'm going to have to go back and watch the third one. I remember seeing... I mean, it's towards the end of the film. I remember seeing that scene.
An ultimate scene, I think, just before the wedding.
Instantly hyped for 3. Like, I wanted 3 immediately after. I was thinking of, like, oh, where's it going to go? Is he going to be in the suit? And part of me... I was going to talk about this in 3, but part of me really wishes he had have just donned the original costume that his dad did. The original mask and the glider and everything like that, but I know that they've got to change up the design. Just it's the best place you could leave it. It's an absolute cliffhanger, not questioning that at all, but to get him to that point at the end of the film, I remember just losing my mind seeing this film for the first time.
I remember it all clearly. He's moping, and it's not the fact it's Willem Dafoe cameoing in the mirror. In the mirror is even more brilliant, but it's when he smashes through the mirror, and it's because I always used to wonder that, where would Goblin keep all his things? Like, I don't know if it's a mansion or just like a penthouse they live at, but I just remember when he goes in the room, enter the Goblin music, and I think did he fall onto the pumpkin bombs sort of wall, which looks amazing. The mask, the glider, and the formula. When I was younger, I can still remember that. Whoa. I cannot wait. I mean, as you can tell, I loved Green Goblin in that Spider-Man review, but Goblin Jr., as someone on the side of these, I love the Spider-Man comics. I did think they were always going to do Hobgoblin, but just Green Goblin 2 made a lot more sense, especially with the angle, but it was the perfect place to leave Harry, and I still wish that this was the final scene of the film, because that would have just made it even more so hyped up for the next, but... It's a absolutely brilliant scene setting up what's to come.
Yeah, I always thought it was Hobgoblin as well, because I remember I loved Spider-Man's Rogue Gallery, and I didn't know much about the comic book history until later, so I didn't realise that there was a second Green Goblin, used exactly the same costume that Norman Osborn did. Hobgoblin was a completely different character. I just liked the look of both of them and thought that Harry was going to be Hobgoblin. I thought that too, so that's interesting. So we'll get on to some more of the side characters now. We need to talk about Aunt May in this one, because some of the best scenes in the film, especially of character, are involving her. So it might be a little cheesy and a little bit on the nose, but the scene, for example, where she's having to pack everything up, and she kind of lays out what it is to be a hero, I think that's definitely a turning point for Peter Parker's character. But all through her character in this film, kind of current state she's at, it's following on from the first one, how Uncle Ben was out of work, he was trying to find another job, but based on his age, he thought it was going to be very difficult, and at this point, I think they're foreclosing on the house, aren't they? She's having money troubles, she can't afford to keep the place. Peter Parker's having his own ones as well, like trying to hold down a job at the pizza place, which I guess we could talk about later on in favourite scenes. And one of the saddest scenes for me, it's a very real scene, is where she's offering Peter Parker money for his birthday, and he says, like, no, you need it, and then she just starts crying, saying, like, for God's sake, please take the money. Like, I've been in situations like that, and it's horrible. But no, I love all this, and especially the scene where Peter Parker outright confesses that he was involved in Uncle Ben's murder, and that he lied to her for all these years. I think you said it was, 2 years between the first one and this one? So for all that time, he's kept the truth from her, and her reaction to that, she doesn't say anything. It's just silence, just leaves the room, and that just speaks volumes just in that scene alone. So some of the best scenes in this film are all with Aunt May, whether the character ones. She even gets involved in the action in this one as well, which is pretty funny. Yeah,
she's got some brilliant scenes, varied from comedy to obviously to drama and the rest of it. But exactly what you said when he tells I guess it's an alternate truth. I loved, because you just think it's the sort of he'd get slapped. I think, is it Amazing Spider-Man 2 where she slaps him when he says some stuff or some crap like that? But I mean, Rosemary Harris, like, she's just a cute old lady. Like, she is Aunt May from the comics, and it was the right direction to get up and leave. And I love that they do revisit it later on. And I think she said, that the less said about that conversation, the better. And she still cares for Peter, and it would be. I mean, I'm not in that situation. I don't think I'd know anyone in that situation. But if you got given information like that, like, how would you take it? And I think it's everything was right about that one. But I love the scene at the bank with her. For anyone that's in Community, Joel McHale is in this, and when I first Community, like, hey, it's the guy from Spider-Man 2 in the bank. And all I can ever remember is just Aunt May kicking him.
Ow!
And it's obviously meant to be Peter, and it's just comedy gold. When Sam Raimi wants to be funny, he makes this film is a better comedy than most comedies I've seen, and it's not even a comedy; it's a superhero film. Yeah,
no, completely agree. And well, I recognised him for a long time. I think I watched Community last year. That was the first time I saw it. But watching him again in this, I did recognise him. But then you told me he was from Community earlier. It blew my mind. So I'm going to have to watch that again with that in mind. The comedy's on point. I'm really glad, though, because, I mean, this is a film that involves both Aunt May and Dr. Octopus. I'm really glad they didn't go with the story from the comic books, where I think Dr. Octopus, like, brainwashes Aunt May into marrying him. And they get married. I don't know if it's like in a ploy to get closer to Peter Parker or Spider-Man or something so he can kill him. I don't know. It's really weird. But actually, going back, this is going on a bit of a tangent here, but the production of it, the actual original idea for this film, if they'd have gone with that, would have been fucking horrible. Like, what was it that there was going to be a love triangle between Dr. Octopus, Mary Jane, and Peter Parker, and he wanted to kill Peter Parker so that he could take his spine out of his body, like Mortal Kombat, and use it for his own. Really, really weird idea, so I'm glad they changed that up. But, so more side characters here now. So this is, again, fleshing out the world of Spider-Man more. Sadly, I guess this is like the Billy D. Williams, Harvey Dent equivalent to the 1989 Batman films, which they're setting up for a future villain, which is never going to come to fruition. We have Dr. Kurt Connors, played by Dylan Baker. I love this character, and if they had have got to Lizard in this universe, it would have been so earned, because he was mentioned in the first film, he featured in the second one, he was in the third one. They had the alien symbiote, so they could have tied that into regrowing his arm. You had all the groundwork there in place for this character, and it's such a shame that Dylan never got to play the character, because I think he would have been a tremendous Dr. Kurt Connors. Yeah, I mean, considering that Kurt Connors is eyeball Paul from Kevin and Perry in The Amazing Spider-Man, and he looked terrible, he looked nothing like the comics, I was always excited as a kid, thinking, oh, one day we're going to get him as Lizard. And I think Spider-Man 4, obviously, it was Mysterio and Vulture, but he was on that list. There had been conversations in the past, obviously, even in Spider-Man 2, that Sony didn't want an all-CGI villain, but then they still put him in the reboot, so what does that matter anyway? Like I said, it's earned. You've seen him in the second film, you've seen him in the third film, he's a character not necessarily like or dislike, but he's there, and if they wanted to focus on him, it would be great, because he doesn't need too much of a setup. Just need to know he's lost an arm, he's got a wife and kid, and I can picture Sam Raimi's version of Lizard as well. The nose out, properly done. It would be terrifying, and it would be an absolute incredible on-site thing to see. And obviously, he's part of Sinister Six, I think. Yeah. So that would have been even better when they were building to it. But as a side character goes, right thing to introduce him slowly across the time. After all, these Sam Raimi films, they will bring in all of the supporting characters mentioned, because why not? It's a big city, New York is, but at the end of the day, the road gallery might be massive, but the gallery of side characters, it's always growing and expanding, and that was the right thing to do. And I know we keep reminiscing's not the right word, but thinking what might have been had we have got more additions to this franchise with Sam Raimi. But can you imagine what his Lizard transformation sequence would have looked like if they'd have got there? Oh, never mind. But more side characters. Another one that actually, it's a character that's introduced in this film, doesn't feature in the third one, but would have been the perfect place to bring him into the third one, because his past in the comic books ties directly into the alien symbiote. But it's the character of Jonah Jameson, Jonah Jameson's son, played by Daniel Gillis, is it? Giles? I don't know how I'm pronouncing that name. He's a character you're not meant to like, because you really want to see Mary Jane get with Peter Parker all the way through these movies. That's a thing that's never changed. But, they had everything set up. The whole astronaut angle. You could have opened the third film with him going into space and bringing back the alien symbiote, whatever you had to. So, really, he's just kind of a nothing character. He's really just a plot point in that you don't want Mary Jane to get with him, and then you have the moment at the end where she runs away from the wedding, which leads to some great one-liners from J.K. Simmons, which we'll get to much later. I don't really have much of an opinion on him, because he's just kind of a douche of a character, really.
Yeah, he's just okay. Who can MJ get with that's not Flash Thompson that's going to trigger people? The Man Wolf is used in the comics, but I love the fact that the only good thing about being Jonah Jameson is that it does tie into JJ for when the time comes to talk about him. But yeah, he's just there, and they get engaged like straight away. The American hero. I think it's meant to be that gap between Peter as the photographer that got sacked from selling pizzas and can't handle it, versus the American hero who's come back from space. That it's the whole dynamic that Mary Jane's picked him over Peter, the status over the personality, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. What else do we have? Okay, other side characters that play a big part in this one and in the second one and in the third one. Sorry, Mr. Ditkovich and his daughter Ursula Ditkovich. We'll talk about Mr. Ditkovich first. Oh my! Even when I watched this film, I thought it was absolutely hilarious. And going back to your point earlier, where you said like these are better than most comedies out there, the stuff with Mr. Ditkovich in this film is brilliant. And we were talking a bit before we hit record, and you painted the perfect picture of how his intro scene in this film goes. How you can hear the music from behind the door. The door opens. He just shouts rent immediately. They're all playing poker around the table. He's that classic landlord character that's always badgering Peter Parker for his rent. And that's the thing that stays with all these films, but he's such a likeable character. He's a really interesting personality. He's not even a character that's from the comics or anything like that. It's a completely fictional character made for these films. But tonally, he's so in keeping with everything that Raimi's done with these films. And I love him. And he actually kind of has some really touching scenes in the next one as well, like when the characters evolve. And Ursula Ditkovich as well. Like, she's genuinely just like a really nice, sweet girl. You could tell she's always has the hots for Peter. She really wants to get with him. And even in the third one, there's always that moment where it's like, oh, Peter, do you really have to get with Mary Jane? Like, Ursula's really nice too. And she has that nice moment in this film as well where she sees that he's down. She says, like, do you want some cake? A glass of milk. So she's there. She's caring. She's that, not shoulder to cry on for Peter, but she's there for him. And I think that's really nice for these two characters. It's a very weird, interesting dynamic to this film, but they work. They fit in.
They fit in perfectly. Mr. Ditkovich, if you Google his name, it just comes up with Rent afterwards. I mean, he's not in it too much, but the scenes he's in, he has that impact that makes him memorable, and he's just so funny. And it's the even when you listen to the music that's on in the background, it's the whole like weird kind of folk, not even folk music. I guess it's just meant to be the country he's from. I guess he's as close as you could get to having a Jonah Jameson type character at home that's not work. That's not a bad thing. It's an amazing thing to do because he's an original character and he's got a lasting impact more than most characters from the comics do. He's someone you wanted more of, and we do get that in the third film, which is one of the good things that happens. But the comedy with him is wonderful, and I think those lines like if you paid your rent on time, my daughter would be fat. Or
if promises were crackers, my daughter would be fat.
and then she just sets the thing on fire, and he just shuts the door. The music stops. The scene cuts, and then even later on, comedy gold is he knocks on the toilet door. He walks out from the other room, just pushes in front of the queue, opens the door, shuts it. He opens the door, says rent, and then Peter Parker closes the door on him. It's how you do comedy. It's what this film needs. It's what the tone. It suits these films. Having he's a loser. He can't pay his rent, and the guys you say having a laugh with him, but I absolutely love him. He's like a shady character, and that's why. Yeah.
It's personality. That's what Sam Raimi brings to these films. Whether they're a main character, a side character, comic relief character, whatever. Even in the third one, say what you want for it, but every character has some form of personality in it, and. He could have just easily been a character. You were saying that he's just that person nagging him at his home. You've got J.K. Simmons nagging at him at work. It was setting Peter Parker up in that place where he's kind of beset upon on all sides. Like, he had the pizza boss who fires him. You've got Ditkovich at home. You've got J.K. Simmons, so it's everyone encroaching on him. So he could have literally just served as that character, but he's given personality. As you said, he's not in many scenes, but those scenes are memorable. Before we get to the almighty character in this film, we need to talk about the Bruce Campbell cameo. He gets a cameo in each of these films. The first movie, he was the wrestling announcer. In this one, I believe he's credited as Snooty Usher. I love his cameo in this again. I love Bruce Campbell. He's one of my favourite actors. He's a real personality. And it's, again, as I said, like that friendship between Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell from the early, I think even before Evil Dead film. I think they were like together, like making films even before Evil Dead. It's nice to see him back in this one. It's a shame though that we never got to see him as Mysterio, because that would have been interesting to say the least. I really wanted to see how that would have turned out, but his cameo in this is just great.
Oh, it's a wonderful cameo. I mean, it took me years to realise that. I knew he was in the second and third one, but for years I never knew he was in the first one, because obviously he doesn't look younger, but it's the whole, wrestling, dark, different outfits and stuff. But it's such a nice, not throwback, but to the whole careers to them. But again, it's not, they didn't do these intending on Mysterio being the fourth one. This wasn't some sort of nonsense where they would pretend that something happened in a film 8 years before was linked, like Spider-Man Homecoming being actually in Iron Man 2, that kind of crap. This was, I've just given my mate cameos in these films, and you know what? He would suit playing this villain, and that's what we would do. It's a shame we never got to it, but I like the cameo. There's like, oh, your shoes are undone, oh, tie, oh, blah, blah, blah. And then end up, oh no, you can't come in today, it's already started. And it suits the kind of boss, like you said a minute ago, Peter Parker's all of his bosses. He's even got one that won't let him go to the theatre, and he just works.
It's like, what was his line? Like, it helps maintain the illusion, or something like that. Which, yeah, that would have played into Mysterio, wouldn't it? Like the whole conjuring illusion things. But let's do it. It's that time of the review again, where we have to talk about the best character in these films. I guess this is going to be a trope of our reviews now, especially with the next one. We'll just save the best character till last. Jonah Jameson, once again played by J.K. Simmons. This is his best film, I think, out of the three. Out of the three films, he has the best moments in this one. And we have a section later on reserved for our best moments in the review, so I might save it for then. But if anyone's listening to this, if you know the character, you know which scene we're talking about. There's one scene, it's completely meme-worthy, like pretty much everything in this movie. I feel like a broken record every time I talk about him. There's nothing else there's hardly any words to describe his performance in this film. He is perfection. The casting of this character was completely on point. His little one-liners, especially at the church at the end, because this was established in the first one. He's all about money. He's always trying to like cut corners, get as much money as he can, and it's at the end he's got this wife who wants everything extravagant. She wants all the expensive stuff, and it's just at the end where he's like, his son's just been stood up. This should be like a heartbreaking moment for him, and all he's worried is about not opening the caviar so he can probably give it back and keep all the money from it. Like, that's just classic JJ right there. He's incredible.
He's, like you said, there's nothing you can add to him. He's exactly as he is in the first film, and actually, you know what? He's not. He's funnier in this, but that's because I think that they realise that we've got gold dust on our hand here. Let's give him some more scenes, and like I said about John Jameson, that the best thing about the character is that he's JJ's son, so we get some more scenes of them together. Mm-hmm. And it's the wedding one. I mean, it's not his best scene. Every scene is a delight to see on screen, but it's the whole call Deborah. He like whispers it, and his wife's like, "What?" The caterer is like, not to open the cabinet. The way she just stares at him, it's just amazing. And he doesn't even look back. He just gets eyes focused. He knows exactly what. Because in the build-up earlier on in the film, someone mentioned, I think, is your wife's online to something about caviar, and
she says she lost the checkbook.
Yeah, the checkbooks. But I think caviar's mentioned in an earlier scene in the film as well, which is even ties into that. But there is nothing. He has no bad moment in any of these films. Even when he gets the suit and there's the laughing guy off eBay, when he's like, "I'll give you $50." He's like, "I can get for that for more." And eBay's like, "Fine, 100," and chuck in a bar of soap as well. There's nothing bad. He's just amazing. And when he realizes his son's wedding is going to be cancelled, it's like, oh, Spider-Man could have saved if I was wrong all along. And then he steals the suit. And
he's right back to where he was originally. Yeah.
I would honestly, I said last time, give me a sitcom like The Office, but it's just to these characters. I want one.
Because when we were doing these reviews and I was going to rewatch them all, Spider-Man 2 was the one that I was looking forward to seeing the most again. And the other day, I was just having the time of my life watching this film, and that opening JJ scene, it's like 10 minutes into the film where, you know, everyone's like rushing in to try and talk to him. 6 minutes to deadline. He's trying to talk to everyone. Betty Brant keeps trying to come in and talk to him. He's like, not now, still not now, and he keeps sending her out. And then what is it? Isn't he going through the pictures? Like, or is that the first one? I get mixed up. Dogs catching frisbees, pigeons in the park.
It's this one because he wants to stop doing Spider-Man pictures, and what's it like? Get these off my table before I throw up or something.
Before
like
I go
that.
into a diabetic coma.
Yeah. He's a delight. I mean, I think I read a lot of these were improv, but they knew what they wanted to do to a degree. But I would love to see some of these bloopers or any B-roll footage they've released. I could imagine being on that. If I was to be a fly on the wall in any scene in the Spider-Man films, it would be the office scenes.
And one of my favourite offhanded ones is the Doctor. I don't know if you want to say it, like the Doctor
I was
Octopus
literally
thing.
about to say, and we get an amazing reference to Doctor Strange, but the weird guy comes in and like, oh, what about Doctor Octopus? He's like, nah, crap, and I think goes through loads of them, and he's like, Doc Ock, yes, and he's like, what do you think?
Was it Hoffman?
Yeah, and he's like, oh, I like it. He's like, of course you do.
Well, you're looking for a raise? Get out.
I absolutely I love him in this. He can do no wrong.
That's one of my favourite lines. He says, like, guy named Otto Octavius winds up with 8 limbs. What are the odds? That's just going back, poking fun at the comic book and the names. I'd love shit like that, and he's brilliant.
Doctor Strange as well.
Yeah,
I love that little. I only realised this tonight, but offline I will say I pitched a film. The only way we can get Spider-Man 4 is if we get Benedict Cumberbatch as Doctor Strange, open up a portal, get rid of Tom Holland, bring through Tobey Maguire, and Doctor Strange is known in this world, so maybe, just maybe.
And we can get middle-aged Tobey Maguire back for one more Spider-Man movie. Oh, hell, just keep making them with Tobey Maguire. I'd love that. Right, we have one other JJ scene to talk about. We'll save that for best moments. So we'll get on to the action and CGI now. So we talked a little bit about the fact that this won an Oscar for best visual effects, and I think you said it's the only comic book movie to win an award for visual effects, isn't it, I think? Yeah,
which is mental when you think about how almost all of them rely on them.
Yeah. But with this one, with it being a sequel, yes, it keeps its focus on character and advances those, but the action is definitely a lot more ramped up in this one. I think maybe the 2 years between the films, technology had advanced a lot. They could do a lot more, and they could push the boundaries with it. So one of the best scenes in this film, best action scenes in probably superhero comic book movie history, is the train sequence. It's exhilarating to watch. They start the fight on top of the train. It moves into the train, and then I know you want to talk about some of Tobey Maguire's expressions when he's at the front of the train. Just all the action, it just works so well. And with Dr. Octopus, I think he was a really smart choice to be the villain in the second one, because you had some. There wasn't really much of it, but you did have some good action with Green Goblin in the first movie. But just as Dr. Octopus as a character, what he's capable of with the 4 mechanical arms, it just makes the combat and the dynamic between the fights so much more visually interesting in this one.
Yeah, it adds more, and even with the train scene, it's not like its own short film, but it has a beginning, a middle, and end, and everything happens in it that could possibly happen in a sort of a train sequence. You've got Spider-Man saving people, making sacrifices, fighting the villain. Every little thing that can happen happens in that scene, and the action is it's brilliant like the first one, and it doesn't feel as heavy lifting as, I mean, with Green Goblin, that when you get to them final dark scenes, because it's just them two fighting each other to the death, it's very different to the whole the project and Spider-Man trying to disrupt it again. It's a very different fight. I feel Green Goblin was a more threatening villain, but they handle Doc Ock better, and that's represented in the CGI. And I guess there's just so much more to do with the tentacles than there is with a glider.
Yeah, and in terms of the actual CGI and the swinging away thing, it looked as better as it's ever been, the best it's ever been. The only CGI, kind of similar to my critiques on the first one, is when you do have a fully CGI rendered character in a close-up shot or something like that. It's very waxy, it's very PlayStation cutscene-y. I don't think there was any way to avoid that, really. They do intermingle a lot of shots of real life actors, but maybe that also helps the fact that it's really easy to pick out when something's completely CGI and when it's not.
Yeah, oh god, yeah. And I think even in 2004 there's a couple of shots where you can see it, but that's the era, and the bad CGI from this film looks better than the bad CGI we get in modern day films as well.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's a testament, but the way they merged the practical with the CG, it's so wonderfully done. Mm-hmm. Even like with stopping the police car in midair with the web. I mean, that's probably practical effects, but everything just works so well in this.
Yeah, and I guess that tying in with the train sequence, I could talk about this bit. A lot of people discover Peter Parker's identity in this one, in that scene. Now, usually with films like that, if someone knows someone's secret identity, I do get a bit annoyed with that, unless it plays into the plot. But this, it's like a really genuine moment, and in all of these films, you have those moments where the people of New York are trying to, like, help Spidey and all that stuff. In the first one, it's a little bit cheesy with the whole, like, you mess with one of us, you mess with all of us, like, all the New Yorkers just show up. It's that completely America moment. In this, though, it feels really genuine, like he has just saved all these families, all these people on this train. You have the moment where, you know, they say they won't tell anyone. The one thing I did notice in this, though, is when they're carrying his body, they do, like, the whole thing that Zack Snyder loves doing now with Superman, the whole Christ imagery thing. When they're carrying him over, like, he's in the crucifix position. Like, he's almost, like, died for their sins or something. I did pick up on that this time. But it's a nice moment, and I like seeing that where... I guess I just like seeing a superhero film where the superhero saves people, and the people are grateful for it. So when you do have scenes like that with the cop car, and that one person says, "Go, Spidey, go," you in the audience are, like, there with them, and, like, yeah, like, you have that heroic sense, which I think is kind of lacking in a lot of superhero films nowadays.
Oh, yeah, and with the Jesus Christ imagery thing, like, I don't like, it's very obvious it is that, but it's never really affected me, and you know, but then if you look at Spider-Man to these people, like, I guess the whole Man of Steel is trying to be godly and stuff like that, but with this, it's just, you've seen how much he's done. He saved all these people's lives, and it's cheesy, and it fits the character of not just Peter Parker but the Tobey Maguire iteration of this, especially when you get the bit 1 minute later where, you know, you've got to get through all of us, and he's just, like, laughing. He just, like, shoves them all apart straight away, no questions asked. And I really do that scene because it was ballsy for them to show him without his mask. But the whole, you know, we're going to keep it a secret, that's awesome. I can live with that, and it builds up the character of Spider-Man even more at this point.
We'll talk about the soundtrack now, then the music. So this is actually, like, a really interesting story surrounding this one. So Danny Elfman comes back once again to do the music for this one. This is probably my least favourite soundtrack out of all three of them. Not to say the music's bad or anything like that. We do get a great new main theme for Dr. Octopus. It plays every time he's on screen. It really works for the character. But there was a lot of turmoil in this one between him and Sam Raimi, to the point where he didn't come back to compose the music for Spider-Man 3. That went to Christopher Young. And it was all down to the fact that in editing there's a thing called temp music, which is where when you construct in the edit, you won't have any of the music yet. With, like, the composer you're getting for the film won't have produced any of the music, so you throw in something called temp music, which is where you just throw in a random track that kind of fits the mood, the pace of what you do, so you can construct your edit around that particular track. And a lot of directors, according to Danny Elfman, I think this is just in the film business anyway, when they watch the edit, and they're watching the edit every single day, they get used to that song and how the edit's composed around it. They think of that song all the time, so when they do get the composer in, they just go to the composer and say, make something exactly like that. And Danny Elfman doesn't like that. He likes to be creative, he likes to be original, he wants to come up with his own songs, not be dictated by someone to copy or replicate someone else's style. So I kind of agree with him there. Like, you know, he's a composer, he's a musician, everyone has a different way of working. But the just music in itself in this one, I don't know if that filtered into his just lack of enthusiasm on this project, but it just kind of feels been there, done that. It feels very samey, and not just samey from the previous Spider-Man film, but a lot of his scores in general. The scene that I'm thinking of the most is where you have Dr. Octopus standing on the pier, and he's saying, like, my rose is dead, my dream is dead. The music there, when the arms are coming alive and talking to him, that's something straight out of a Tim Burton film. It's those, like, high-pitched violins, kind of discordant sounding, very creepy, very gothic. Like, you could imagine that in Sleepy Hollow or Edward Scissorhands or something like that. There's a lot of moments like that, and I don't know if that music inherently works for the tone of this movie.
Yeah, I mean, the soundtrack is not as good as 1 or 3. I love the Doc Ock stuff, but except for that, there's nothing new. It's exactly like the Spider-Man 1, and, you know, it's not a bad thing, it's not a good thing, but you know, all the behind the scenes stuff is very fascinating, especially the temp tracks, because, like I said, it's exactly like Spider-Man 1, and you can just tell that they had the Spider-Man 1 OST on when they were doing the editing, and just thought, okay, we're going to put this on air. Hey, can you actually do this instead for us? And, you know, Would there have been anything else though? It's not like in Spider-Man 3. We'll get to it in the next review, but there's Venom, there's Sandman, there's more themes in that. Whereas in this, I guess the only really new one is Doc Ock as such.
And that's it, yeah.
And maybe that's because there's not any new characters, but it's a fascinating debate. But obviously, we looked before we hit record, and he did work with Sam Raimi again on the Oz films. Mm-hmm. Well, the film, sorry, just one of them. There wasn't any more because they're terrible, but yeah, it's sad he didn't come back for the third one. But we'll get to that in the review tomorrow. But there is other stuff that happened with it. But I don't mind the story. I mean, the opening titles are still amazing. To me, that's always getting me hyped for a Spider-Man film. But I don't mind the soundtrack. It's not great, but it's not bad. It suits what they were doing.
Mm-hmm. And you talk about the opening sequence there. I've always said I do miss opening title sequences in films. They're very rare nowadays, and the artwork in this one's fantastic. I like how it recaps the first film as well. Spider-Man 3 does that with recapping Spider-Man 1 and 2. We can talk more about that title sequence when we get to our Spider-Man 3 review. So we'll get to our section on best moments of this one. I'm going to let you take this one because I think tied at number 1, I think we're going to have exactly the same pick for this one.
Yeah, we'll save that for a bit later. My best moments, Jesus.
There's so many good ones. I mean, you said the entire movie, and I'm inclined to agree with you because it's so good.
Yeah, I can't follow it. I don't think there's a bad scene in this. Even him reading poetry, that's not a bad scene. That's them making Peter Parker the creep he is and the loser. That's good. And I will say it again. There is no bad scene. The film flows. They're all great. A scene doesn't come on where I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake, how do I get to the next one? I don't feel like I get any of that. I just want to keep going and going. So, but as far as the best moments go, I would have to specifically say I prefer the bank scene to the train sequence. But my favourite scene, obviously we'll get to that, but the other one is what I said earlier, Harry Osborn and finding out, discovering the lair.
I'm trying to think what mine would be. I really like some of the cheesy moments in this film. For example, I love the raindrops keep falling on my head montage. Yeah. Especially, there's the freeze frame at the end. It's so cheesy, but it just completely works. And there's actually kind of a lot of funny moments in this film in terms of physical comedy as well. But it's so painful, like the scenes where Peter loses his powers and then he just like falls from like a skyscraper and bounces his back off like a car. It's that the sound in that scene is so painful. Like anything like where someone damages like a bone or like the back or something, and you hear it crack, and he just kind of like shambles off, reaches out, touches the car, and the alarm goes off. I love that scene. But yeah, like the whole film, it just flows right, and just every scene into the next, it all feels so much of a whole. But yeah, I go with the number 1 scene right now. I think it's time.
Oh, can I have an advance?
I can't do the laugh. I really want to. It's probably my favourite movie laugh in history, and it's one that I really wish I could replicate, but it's so just tied to J.K. Simmons. Yeah, can you pay me an advance scene? The amount of times, especially recently, the amount of times that we've used this clip on our own channel, like when we're talking on the group chat, it's amazing. It's always like my go-to one. You talk about, like quotes from movies that you use in everyday life, like for example, if you quote a Star Wars one, whatever it happens to be. But this, like, you can't really quote this one. You have to show the clip. You have to send the clip to someone. You have to play it in front of them. It's the best way. It's my favourite JK scene as well.
Oh, it's his best scene, and there's so many wonderful scenes, but just the laugh, the confusion on Peter's face, even the others like laughing in the room when they have a long shot, like it's just amazing. And are you serious? Right at the end of it, he's like, planetarium tomorrow.
There's a door.
I send it so many times to people. I that will never ever get old.
I kind of wish we could like play it in like the middle of this review, just so that everyone can share in that moment. It's so good.
Well, it's just like, what are your thoughts on Homecoming? And just insert laugh here.
It's just applicable to everything. I love it. I mean, we're going to overall thoughts now, but I think people, if you're still listening to this point, you know exactly what our thoughts are. But George, overall thoughts on Spider-Man 2?
One of the best comic films ever made. A very worthy successor to Spider-Man 1. One of my favourite sequels ever made. A child is cherished from my childhood, and I can only say positive things about this film. It's truly stunning. If you want to see a sequel, a superhero film that's not all about 10 people, that you don't have to watch 8 films before it to understand what's going on, you just watch one. You don't even need to watch one before it, because we get sweet intro titles where they reminisce in the first film. You don't actually need to watch Spider-Man 1, it shows you what to do. And yeah, I can't fault this. Go and watch it. If you've already seen it, then you know what I'm going to say. Go and rewatch it. And just pick out, there's a brilliant video on YouTube, top 10 JJ and Jameson moments. Go watch that while you're out there as well.
That's pretty much my review as well. I don't know what else I can add. Kind of like what I did with Spider-Man 1 though, before watching it when I was gearing up for these reviews, I kept thinking like, oh god, are these going to be as good as I remember them? Or will they have aged really badly since we've had so many other comic book movies since then? And they're still among the best. They really, really are. They hold up tremendously well. As you said, this is one of the best sequels. I probably prefer this one more than Spider-Man 1, but the two are very so close for me at this point. I love the characterization. I love how they advance all the characters. I love the additions like Dr. Octopus. And it's that classic middle chapter where it's not the darkest one, but in terms of where it takes the characters, it gets them to all the places that we needed to get them. Following Spider-Man 1, going into Spider-Man 3, and whether all of those plot lines were paid off in Spider-Man 3 will be our review next time, where we conclude our reviews, unfortunately, on the Sam Raimi Spider-Man series. So that'll do it for our review on Spider-Man 2. Be sure to comment, subscribe, let us know what you think of this film. Is it your favourite one in the series? Anything Spider-Man related, please do drop us a comment. In terms of what's coming up on the channel, as I said, Spider-Man 3 review coming very soon, and Spider-Man Homecoming review will be our review for the weekend. Might be looking forward to that one now. A few early reviews have come out for that, said it's actually really good, but I will reserve judgment until I've seen the movie. There'll be more trailer reactions from me. We've got new shows coming out all the time. We've got Rockathon, Thoughts on Film, our new show every Thursday. So much stuff. So like, comment, subscribe, share, all that good stuff. And until the next review, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for listening.